So now we have Guardrails for the Agentic Age, Navigating the Cybersecurity and Tech Risks in AI Workforces by Simon Sulima, AVP of Information Risk on Model Life. Where are you, Simon? There? Come over. Applause.
Thanks, Daniel.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. All right. Okay, can you hear me? Perfect. Good afternoon. It's 3 o'clock. I know it's after lunch. I hope you're well caffeinated, and we're going to be talking about something really exciting. And this is going to be about securing AI agents. 2 years ago, well, almost 2 years ago, April 8th, 2024, Wednesday, I'm working as usual, and it's very quiet at work. And I work from home. There's lots of messages, emails, team messages I receive. This day is super quiet, and I'm like, what's going on? Turns out a lot of people took a day off to enjoy the solar eclipse, which I think most of you are from the GTA, so you might have witnessed this firsthand. And I'm like, this is interesting. Am I missing something big? So it's 2:45 p.m. and things are getting really dark, like twilight. I'm like, this is interesting. So I take my DSLR camera, put my best lens, go outside, and then I see, it was a little bit cloudy, but I see the sun, and it doesn't look normal. So I start shooting, and I keep shooting for like 10 minutes, non-stop, and then when I look at the pictures I took, I see this. No one is excited, because this is not my picture. I took something like this. And I didn't use my DSLR camera, I just had my iPhone. And then I realized I didn't buy my glasses, these special glasses, because you don't want to look at that thing. I wasn't prepared, I didn't take any time off. And it just occurred to me, like I was missing out a lot, right? Because a lot of people understood that this is once in a lifetime experience, and actually the next one is going to be in 2045, 19 years from now, and I better take that day off and then have all the equipment ready so I can do proper pictures. Not this, but close. The point I'm trying to make is. AI in general, Gen AI more specifically, and more specifically Agentic AI, a lot of people have this fear of missing out, FOMO, right? And the previous speaker mentioned about train leaving the station, and people are trying to get on this train and experiment and get their hands dirty. And I think we all feel lots of pressure. I work in a big financial company. I'm sure many of you do too, like big banks, insurance companies, fintech, and there is just lots of pressure on all of us to play with AI, to experiment, get some skills, and hopefully some of this is going to go to production. The success rate is not as high, but it's okay. We're early in this stage. So, anyone heard about the car wash problem? Okay, some people have, okay. So, this is a simple prompt, and by the way, once the talk is over, you can try this in your ChatGPT, whatever you use, Gemini. I want to wash my car is at my home, the car wash is only 50 meters, should I walk or drive there? Okay, so for us humans, it's no-brainer, right? So when I enter this as a prompt in one of the LLMs, it says, well, you should definitely walk. Why? Because it's environmentally friendly, it's only 50 meters, it's going to take you like a minute or so, right? And it just gives all those reasons. And I'm like, really? Yes, things are getting much better. And again, November, December last year, we saw a huge change in the LLM space. But I did it too last week, right? So it's still there, and this is like the best model. With ChatGPT, it's a little bit better. But I think because people knew about this and people were like giving thumbs up or thumbs down to through reinforcement learning with human feedback, and so ChatGPT I think was a little bit better. Okay, so let's talk about agents, AI agents specifically. I know it's a busy slide, but basically what it tells you is that an agent is software which can act autonomously based on the data it receives and based on the tools it can interact with without much human oversight, right? So this is a definition of an agent. It is different from Gen AI, right? Obviously, the promise of Gen AI, okay, let's just be honest, it hasn't lived to all the hype that we had like 2 years ago, even last year, right? Chatbots are useful, but there is very limited, I guess, footprint that it can create. Like call centers, yes. Like working with internal documentation, yes. Some brave companies even expose chatbots to their external customers. But there's only so much that traditional Gen AI can do. Agentic AI promises to fulfill that gap, right, and bridge that gap. So it is different because it can be autonomous. It has access to different tools through APIs, through external systems, and we already have some good examples. So self-driving cars is a really good example. Smart assistants or digital workers is another one coming up really, really fast. And yeah, I think it has huge potential. So my philosophy is that I can't secure a system if I don't understand that. So I'm taking you on this journey, right? So to kind of see what's behind the scenes of an AI agent, and then together, hopefully, maybe through questions or interaction, you can help me secure that AI agent. So AI agent, think about this as a loop, right? And so loop starts with observation. So we have different sensors. Think about IoT, cameras, even your phones, right? Has lots of sensors. The agent observes through different means. Now it reasons, and we had that with LLMs already. Like, so you can interact with LLM, your chatbot can, and it can reason, right? Things are getting better with the reasoning models. Then what's new, as I said, it can act. It can do something with that information, with that reasoning. And then what's important that it can also learn, and so that makes a loop. So it learns, observes more, reasons, and acts. We'll get a little bit technical, but it's not too technical, I'm sure, for this audience, because most of you work with data, AI, security, governance, and things like that. So this is going to be okay. So we'll start with the AI orchestrator, and then, as we discussed, observe, reason, act, learn. This is the loop. If we add reasoning engine, i.e. LLM, right? That agent can send prompts, get completions, responses. That's not new. That has existed ever since like ChatGPT was. It came out like 3.5 years ago, 2022. Yeah. So this is not new. We add RAG to this, right? And I think most of you know RAG. Most of you have this already and mastered that. This system, and this is really useful, especially with chatbots that we all have, I'm sure. So the idea is that there is a pipeline to source the information, chunk, tokenize, create vector embeddings, and use that to derive some semantic meaning from your information. So far, we haven't talked about agents. So far, it has existed for a couple of years now, like this setup. So we have LLM, we have RAG on the side, and then the orchestration that sits in the middle kind of uses information from RAG, sends to LLM, and gets some meaningful completions. So what we're going to be adding with agents is we're going to define some goals, and we're going to define some skills. So this is new, right? You can say, yeah, Simon, this is part of orchestrator. Yes, but this is, we didn't have that with Gen AI, so this is new. This is where you define, you are the AI agent that does ABC. Here's your skills, right? And by the way, skills, you'll hear more about this, OpenClaw is a good example. It has skills, but when we talk about agentic AI, the skills is basically ability, what that agent can and cannot do. Then we have to add memory, short-term memory for context, and long-term memory in the form of vector store to store the knowledge, the observations, and other things. Then this is also new for us that agentic AI brought integration with different tools and APIs, right? The agent can, if you give access to your email system or your Teams or Slack, it can send messages, it can respond to emails. For those of you who are curious about what's going on with OpenClaw, specifically, there is lots of information you can find, but there is an anecdote, like real example. A person gave access to email, and then a human was wondering, okay, so hey, agent, like what are you doing right now? And the agent says, I'm deleting your inbox. And human's like, wait a second, what's going on? Why are you deleting your inbox? For no reason. Okay, I'll stop doing this, right? So things like that, which if you give access to those tools, like extension of your real life, digital life, then this can happen, right? Web browsing, an agent can go on a website, and then click, log in, do something. Code development is a good use case. I have GitHub here, but it can be any code repository where an agent can just modify a code, can create pull requests and things like that. I think what's missing here is observability, security, and compliance. This is, I call it necessary evil because we have to do this, and not just because that's the hat I'm wearing. I probably all of you understand the need for that because when I think about governance, risk, compliance, security, I think about a highway, right? So picture 401 going towards Montreal, and then you can actually, your cars can drive up to 220, 250 kilometers per hour, right? But there is a reason why we can only drive 110 or 120 hours per hour, not because your car is not capable, but because it's unsafe, right? It can lead to accidents, so people can die. And so that's how I explain what I do to my customers or like people who I meet, is that I put those guardrails and I make sure that you do what you need to do securely, safely, and you eventually finish what you're supposed to finish, right? So this is that's why I'm saying it's necessary evil. So let's talk about security challenges, and this is where there are some unique challenges to AI agents which we didn't have before, and I think one of the key differentiators for AI agents versus even like traditional Gen AI is that the cognition becomes an attack vector. So an attacker wants to tamper with cognition of an AI agent through goals misalignment, through injecting different thoughts or skills into the actual AI agent. But this is not all. One of the top challenges is non-deterministic nature of AI in general, and Gen AI and Agentic AI specifically. What does it mean? We, like in traditional IT, we used to, we know that 1 plus 1 equals 2, right? In AI, it doesn't really work like that. Sometimes 1 plus 1 equals -5, right? And Gen AI is not a calculator. It's very good with reasoning, with summarization, and many other use cases, but it's not really good with traditional mathematical computations, I would say. So its behavior is probabilistic, not deterministic. So you never know what the result is going to be. And that's the biggest challenge with AI because, if I think about SQL injections, right? And we've been dealing with SQL injections for decades. And so we've mastered the protection against SQL injection. So you can say, this regular expression, if you see that, just block it, because this is SQL injection. With AI, you can do that because it's natural language. You can basically, like you can social engineer a person, you can fool a person into doing or saying something. You can do the same with AI, and so that becomes a really big challenge. So traditional security controls and tools can't 100% like detect and prevent from attacks. Another one is we talked about access to tools, API, external systems. This is something that didn't exist before Agentic AI. Like Gen AI didn't have access to that, maybe through RAG, but that's like a separate story. But now it has access to your email, has access to your GitHub, has access to your different tools. So yeah, that's a pretty big one. Access to sensitive data sources. Also, like for an AI agent to be effective, you can't just, some people say, oh, I'm going to install OpenClaw in the sandbox. Or like, I'm going to buy a mini Mac computer and I'm going to install that, and I'm not going to give access to anything. Well, what's the point? How can you test that the AI agent actually works? And it's not going to be your digital assistant if you don't give access to that. And by the way, like with the previous speaker, I'm not saying go ahead and install OpenClaw. Not now. Like it needs to be like security is not there. Anyway, so you will have to give access to some data, right? So you have to think about least privilege principle. Agentic AI is not an application ID, doesn't have an application ID in the traditional sense, and it doesn't have a human ID either, right? So it kind of sits in the middle because it behaves like a human, but at the same time, the traditional security doesn't work there because it doesn't lock, like with passwords or MFA, like it uses some persistent tokens. So it's kind of like just difficult to wrap our head around what that identity is and how to secure that. And that's one of the challenges, which, by the way, without calling names, but even like big cloud providers, I don't think they have an effective solution to deal with agentic identities yet. They get in there, they say, well, we have that, but in reality, it's still pretty raw. So prompt injection, manipulation of agent reasoning. This is kind of not new because we had prompt injection before with Gen AI, but now we can not just inject malicious prompts, but we actually steer the reasoning towards the bad outcome. Memory poisoning and persistent state risk is a big thing, as if you remember on the diagram, there is a memory, there is short-term memory, there is long-term memory, and that is as an attack vector because it can be poisoned, meaning that something wrong can be injected to, make the agent behave differently. So yeah, that's the risk. Cross-system, because agent, it's not very effective if it just sits in isolation. It needs to interact with other agents through different protocols. So that's why we have this cross-system risk right now. And then if one agent hallucinates and then interacts with another agent, that hallucination just proliferates. And then at the end, you get completely different wrong result. Runtime, model exposure, and lack of execution. So that's, I guess, goes without saying. So the sensitive information from models, like what you use to train that model, can be exposed if it's not secured properly. And last but not least here is agents, like humans, need to be monitored for activities and also behavior. In security, we have been using this for years for humans. It's called user behavioral analytics, UBA, and that needs to happen to agents too, because guess what? Agents go rogue, or agents are hacked, and they also behave in an abnormal way. So I think those controls that are applicable to humans need to be applicable to agents. All right, I'll give you some tools. We're not going to have too much time to talk about them, but and this is not my intention to go like really deep into like different security frameworks, but you can take pictures, or like the slides will be available in a few days. But those are some of the best practices I recommend, and this is what we use in my company, and they are I guess, more comprehensive than others. My number one choice is OWASP Top 10 for agentic applications. For those of you who know OWASP, it has existed for many years, and OWASP used to mean Open Web Application Security Project, so it was for web applications. But it has evolved from web applications to like basically IT, because there is top 10 for APIs, there is top 10 for ML, there is top 10 for LLM, and now there is top 10 for agentic applications. This is a great list, a great starting point, like those 10 threats. And you don't have to see that, I didn't mean that. But then, this is just top 10. So don't get fixated that if you have top 10, then you're good. You haven't really done your job comprehensively, because this is just top 10, right? But it's a really good starting point. And I encourage you to read this paper and share with your security risk colleagues, because I think this is very important. And it talks about the agent's behavior, it talks about access to data, different systems, agent-to-agent communication, and things like that. Another tool I want to give you it's called Agentic Trust Framework from Cloud Security Alliance. And so the idea here is zero trust. I'm sure many of you have heard about zero trust. That means never trust, always verify. And basically, we just taken the same approach to agentic AI. So what it talks about is that, yes, you have to verify every agentic identity. Then you have to understand what it's doing, what the goal is, what the objective of that agent is. Then you have to sanitize input, right? And you have to scrutinize what that agent gets from your data sources or from other agents. You segment, you use least privilege principle so that that agent doesn't have access to everything. And then last but not least, assume that something bad can happen eventually, and then that's one of the principles of zero trust. And so if something goes wrong, then you have to have detection and response that can help you recover from that incident. So I think a lot of you use AWS, and this is one of the sponsors. So they have a good framework called Agentic AI Security Scope and Matrix. It talks about different, it's called scope, scope 1, 2, 3, and 4. Basically, what it means, scope 1 is agent is very powerless, doesn't really do much without humans. And scope 4 is agent is completely autonomous. So 2 and 3 sort of sit in the middle. And based on what the scope is, you have to apply different controls, right? And if the scope 4, then you have to really have a robust security framework in place. And they do have some good recommendations what that means. My favorite approach or methodology is called Maestro. It's from Cloud Security Alliance. And this is called, it's a threat modeling methodology. Basically, you think about risk scenarios, threats, and you think about countermeasures or controls. And it's specifically designed for agentic AI. And as you can see, there are 7 different layers. And so Gemini helped me with this picture. But basically, if I think about threat modeling using Maestro, I think about a building with 7 floors. Okay? So what do I have on the ground floor? I have my LLMs, right? Or like traditional models. So I have to secure them from poisoning. I have to secure them from theft. I have to secure them from denial of service and other things. Then on the second floor, I have data operations. This is your rack. This is your data sources. This is where you need to make sure that the pipelines are solid and secure, and you have data provenance, so you know where data is coming from. So that's all level 2. Level 3 is agentic framework. This is where you build, deploy and run your agents, and this is the environment where agents can interact. And what I'm seeing right now in the industry is that there is, like, AI platforms are becoming more and more prevalent, like companies are exploring or deploying AI platforms, and this is where we want to also host our agents, because this is where we can ensure data governance, AI governance, and security governance. on top of that. Deployment and infrastructure, this is a kind of a runtime environment for your agents, where it can be Docker containers in a Kubernetes cluster. This is your network infrastructure. This is your servers. Wherever you run your agents, that's it. Evaluation, observability, and security compliance. This is the governance risk compliance that we talked about. So we need to get logs about what agents is doing. We also need to analyze to make sure that there is no malicious behavior in the agent's actions. And then we need to secure it and make sure compliance, regulatory compliance, and other things. And then last but not least, agentic ecosystem. This is where agents interact with different tools, sensors, IoT devices, basically the whole agentic ecosystem. So that's it in terms of frameworks. The key takeaways for us today is agentic AI is the next frontier after Gen AI, and AI chatbots have been limited in functionality. That's why we've seen rise of agentic AI. Securing AI agents is difficult. There are some unique challenges, and one of them is non-deterministic nature of agentic AI. I think we need to keep humans in or on the loop where it makes sense, because given full agency, full autonomy to agents might be too risky. And then you might use like a staged approach. So you start with less autonomy, and then you kind of give more and more and more. So you test, you observe, you make changes. But I think it's important to keep humans where it makes sense. For all the natural language inputs, like prompts or interaction from other agents, make sure that you scrutinize, you sanitize those inputs. You look for prompt injection and other malicious inputs. And then you do the same with outputs, so that LLM or agent doesn't exfiltrate sensitive information. Don't trust, always verify. This is one of the principles of zero trust. And with that, log and monitor. Like I explained, this is important. We do this with humans, so we have to do this with agents. And then it's not here, but explore, learn, experiment, and I think we need to embrace that. A lot of us are in governance, risk compliance functions. I think we are sometimes seen as a blocker or obstacle. So we need to educate ourselves and our teams to make sure that we provide those guardrails and allow our business to use those technologies in a safe, sound, secure way. With that, if there's any questions, we have 2 minutes. Yep, go ahead.
Sorry, hi. Just going back to where you first started on this, you were talking about that example of the car wash prompt. Did you at all or ever check that against other LLMs as a judge to see whether, how the LLM performed on a question like that? And if you did see any improvement on a prompt in that nature, could that also be used on a security front to see if a model is being misguided in its original intent?
Yeah. What you're talking about is one of the fundamentals security challenges for LLMs. Not agents. I wouldn't say this is just for agents, but LLMs. And you need to build guardrails into your LLM so that when my prompt wasn't malicious. It's just LLM didn't understand the intent. So if I explained, and in subsequent interactions, I did explain that, hey, this is my car, I need to wash it, right? So, and then the LLM said, oh yeah, well, you should have mentioned that, something like that. But if we talk about security challenges or security risks, then absolutely your guardrails need to be built into your LLMs, but not just LLMs, your whole AI ecosystem. So there is a thing called AI firewall. So it sits between you or your agent and LLM, and it looks at the prompts and completions, right? Make sure that it's good, right? There's nothing bad going on. There's also a control, quite effective, called red teaming exercise. It's like a penetration test just for AI and done by humans, right? They try to circumvent those guardrails and social engineer, right, to jailbreak, right, and get some sensitive information from LLM. But yeah, those things are very important, and yeah, you absolutely need to have them.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Very interesting.
Thank you, Daniel.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
And